Let's kick this thing off, share my screen real quick and make the introductions. For those of you who've been here before, this is episode 5, but this time we're featuring Greg Crabtree himself, David Hawks, and Eric Cottrell of Agile Velocity. A little bit about me. I saw a thing before, the host should always just tell a little bit about himself. I won't run through this all, but my favorite thing on here is that I do have 4 kids, and in my free time, we do laundry and clean up after them. But in all seriousness, I'm a business development director for Carr, Riggs & Ingram. I'm a member of the Simple Numbers consulting team. I've been working with Greg for about 8.5 years now, and part of the consulting and Simple Numbers work we do, I've been a part of that the whole time. Today, I want to introduce you to David Hawks. David Hawks is the founder and chief agilist of Agile Velocity. David is a certified enterprise coach and certified Scrum trainer who is passionate about helping organizations achieve agility beyond the basic implementation of Agile practices. David's primary focus is guiding leaders through their Agile transformation with a focus on achieving real business results. David, thank you for the short intro. Whoever was on last time and was here when I read Andy Bailey's and I was winded and injured, David and Eric gave me great bios. CEO Eric Cottrell is the CEO of Agile Velocity. Eric leads the company through continuously promoting a strong people-first culture built on a foundation of trust, open discussion, continuous improvement, and teamwork. He also uses 20 years of experience in product management and leading strategic growth to develop new products, initiatives for Agile Velocity and the goal of delighting their customers. And of course, Greg Crabtree, author of Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits, was soon to be Simple Numbers 2.0, Rules for Smart Scaling, coming out soon. We're excited for that. He's the partner in charge of our Huntsville location for Carr, Riggs & Ingram. And prior to that, obviously, we merged with CRI. He was the CEO of Crabtree, Rowan-Berger. Also on the line, we have Kristen McLean at the Vivid Inc. company. She'll be building an illustrated model of today's discussion that will help you remember the content and make it actionable. I will send all that out afterwards. It's great stuff. She actually illustrates while we talk and then sends it out. Coolest stuff you'll ever see. So with that being said, David, Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining today. We are thrilled to talk to you about unleashing leadership for yourself and for your teams. We are in Austin, Texas, and it's great to be able to connect with folks all over the country. So we are going to be walking you through a perspective that we have about how we're helping companies become more agile in terms of responding to some changes that are happening. Obviously, we've all seen some of the impacts of what's going on in the world, and I think this is a timely subject. So we're going to walk you through that, and we'll save some time at the end for Q&A. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. There's a Q&A window, so go ahead and queue up your questions there, and we'll get to those at the end. So as we jump into this, what we thought we would do is give Greg a moment to give us his perspective on why Agile and why now. Greg?
Yeah, I mean, in our ongoing discussions with clients, and you can come up with all the greatest ideas in the world, but to execute them, to get them out there, is always seems to be the challenge. And with our signature metric of labor efficiency ratio, as we see the repeat data month in, month out, going through those rhythms with the clients, we start to draw inferences in terms of what works and what doesn't. And I would say that, as we've been exposed to the concept of Agile, the more that we can integrate those into a non-technology business, we've seen significant improvements in changes of thinking. Now, you still got to go through the behavioral aspect of getting people to want to change in that process. But whenever we've taken either business units or processes and applied the concepts of that rhythm, the pre-planning, the monitoring throughout, the post-event planning, and sequencing that example faster and faster, it ties into something I talk about in the new book that, and I've started calling it the cooperative economy. In essence, is what we see in economics is, I think, the greatest advance of the U.S. economy in the last 10 years has been the fact of a faster transaction cycle, which means there's less capital invested, a more competitive profit that can be charged to be in the market, but sometimes also harvested and maintained, because you've not only gotten faster, but you get to keep that profitability because nobody else can do it. And it's a competitive advantage. And so in that end result, you have a faster movement from beginning to end of the value chain and a much better return on investment, of that process. And so it ties easily hand in hand with that. We've got to work these processes and interactions with everything through the value chain, from supplier to us being the deliverer of the product or the service to the ultimate customer. And I think it's high time that the framework is there, and I'm excited that folks like yourself are willing to create that adaptive bridge to get us thinking that same way that really the best of the best programmers have been doing in the technology space for years.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Greg, you mentioned things moving faster, and we have an interesting take on our current situation. So just to kind of get us into a frame of mind here about what's going on a little bit, there's some statistics around the TSA checkpoint travel numbers, and the year-over-year numbers are pretty stark.
Eric,
so
are
from
you sharing?
Oh, I'm not sharing. I need to share. Thank you. How about now? Good?
No, I'm not seeing it.
You see it? Okay.
Excellent.
I'm not.
No, I'm not.
All right, so let's try it again.
There you
go. There it is. We see a skyline. Now recent statistics.
Excellent. Thank you for bearing with us. So the statistics that we're looking at are coming from the TSA website. And if you look at the year-over-year numbers from April 8th of 2019 to April 8th of 2020, the drop-off in traffic was significant, right? 96% reduction in people moving through the lines at the TSA checkpoints. I thought that was interesting and obviously stark, but when I looked a little closer, it got even more stark. So if you were to compare month over month, 2020, the numbers are almost equivalent. The speed at which people experienced this amazing shock in our system is just so evident, obviously in so many different ways, but probably nowhere more obvious than in air travel. And what we're seeing is that companies are basically trying to figure out a few things. First, how do we survive? How do we get through this? And then I think for the folks who are seeking to actually benefit from change, how do I take advantage of it? And so the fact of the matter is that we have been experiencing something that is part of what we talk about, which is the leader's current reality. We used to have to talk about change being something that would affect you and you had to be on the lookout for it. But because of what's happened, it's become the conversation. How do we manage? And some firms are actually shattered. Some companies have been shattered. Their business models and their ability to weather what's going on have been really challenged. And some are hunkering down and trying to figure out how do we wait this thing out. And others are actually trying to figure out how do we benefit. And so the reality that we're all living in, and we're all feeling it, whether we're leading businesses or running households or just trying to figure out how we get through the day, the world has changed. And this notion of VUCA, which comes from a military understanding of what has happened with the new modern battlefield, really begins to cast a new perspective and gives leaders a new context for understanding where they are relative to the environment in which they're trying to lead and to grow business and to take advantage of opportunities. And VUCA is it's an acronym, and it stands for 4 different terms that we're going to walk through to give you some perspective as to what's happening in the world. So just like folks in transportation have experienced, we're all sensing and experiencing this notion of we live in a volatile world. Probably not more so than right now in terms of my lifetime for sure. And that is that things have changed, and things have changed, and the rate of change has sped up. We may be seeing that in terms of what's happened with obviously with the pandemic, but we're also seeing it in terms of how quickly we can be disrupted through supply chains, or we can be disrupted through any kinds of macroeconomic events, and they're happening much, much faster. And so we're having to live in this context of this turbulence and the dynamics of change, and it's becoming more and more important that we're able to adapt and to adjust. So V is for volatile in VUCA. The other thing that we're facing is this uncertainty. We are able to see less and less well into the future. We're able to see closer and closer, maybe, but even then it's hard to predict what's going to come around the bend. This whole notion that we can plan a year out now is almost seems laughable in comparison to what we're dealing with. And so our window for being able to predict what's next is very uncertain, and that's just becoming a part of the reality, is that we're just not sure how can we reliably fix on the future, and it's not quite that easy. So volatile, uncertain. C is for complexity or complex. Our world, I think an easy way to understand it is we are a network of networks. We have dependencies, and I think we've seen this in everything from the personal protective equipment that are reliant upon global supply chains to be able to produce goods. We are living in a world where our interconnectedness has grown significantly. Individuals are able to take a stand on a platform, and they can, through TikTok or through Instagram or through YouTube, they're able to influence entire industries. And the ability for companies to adjust and adapt in this massively networked world is proving to be really challenging for a lot. And it's creating what we would consider to be some fragility in organizations' ability to respond. So we are absolutely an interconnected global experience. So the A in VUCA stands for ambiguous. And in this case, ambiguity is extremely important because we can no longer ascertain friend or foe. The meaning of events and the meaning of data is actually much more difficult to ascertain. We just don't know. We can't put our finger on or interpret what's going on. So we don't really know. And so when you have a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and that is the pressure that we feel as leaders, how do we respond? How do we navigate it? How do we help our teams move from being perhaps fragile, where when change happens, it creates a shock for us? How do we begin to take advantage of and prepare our teams and prepare ourselves even for being able to lead through change? And I think that's exactly where agility and becoming an agile leader can become quite helpful. And so at this point, allow me to introduce David. David is going to walk us through an overview of Agile from our perspective and talk about the principles that make it an anti-fragile model. So David, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Let me, I'm interested in, I'm going to do some very cryptic drawing, and then what I understand is then it's going to be beautified in the output that we get. So I'm excited for that.
Kristen will make you look good.
Yeah, Crystal's going to make me look really good. So here's the premise of thinking about this VUCA aspect is that I believe we've been applying the wrong approach, the wrong model for how we manage work and how we plan work in the world of knowledge work, which most of our organizations now are companies of knowledge workers. And we've been applying manufacturing processes to knowledge work. And if you think about manufacturing, You know, you have a starting point, you have a target, and in that world, you have what we call known knowns, right? Like you're manufacturing, you know, an iPhone, and you're manufacturing an iPhone over and over again. The battery is known. You know where it's going to go. You know where the camera is going to go. You know what order you're going to put things through. You know the sequence of events. They're tightly coupled and they're repeatable. And while we would love all of our processes to be tightly coupled and repeatable, they're not, because we live in a VUCA world. And while we really feel it now, we were in a VUCA world before, right? You know, we all say all the time, like the rate of change is increasing faster and faster. Well, that means the rate of disruption of every industry that all of us are in as business owners is being disrupted faster and faster by anybody anywhere in the world. Because of technology advancements, because of, anybody can create a new app somewhere in the world and it's going to disrupt an industry. So what we've been applying is this approach that I call we've been very plan driven in how we approach things. We say, all right, we're going to define everything up front. We're going to create a plan. We're going to execute on it. We're going to manage to the plan. And that's great if up front you had perfect requirements, if you had a perfect solution in mind. But the problem is, at the beginning of this project, this is not our smartest point. This is our dumbest point. And that's when we tend to make the hardest decisions and lock them in up front. And then we manage and we resist change along the way. But here's how we really need to approach things from an Agile perspective. In an Agile perspective, we're going to say, based on the information we have, we're going to admit we don't have everything figured out, because we live in the world of what we call unknown unknowns in knowledge work. That means there's things that we're going to run into we've never run into before. There's problems that we have to solve that we've never solved before. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set out towards that red target, but that's not actually our target. That's just where we're forecasted we're going to go. And what we're going to do in an Agile world is we're going to work in an iterative fashion. We're going to be constantly inspecting and adapting, and accelerating learning is the most important thing. Accelerating validation or invalidation of our ideas, of our assumptions, of our hypotheses of what we need to build. And so we're going to go for a couple of weeks. We're going to time box. We're going to get some work done, and then we're going to inspect and adapt. And that may say we keep heading on the red line, but more than often it says we need to deviate from that line. We've learned something new. Something has changed, some new high priority, or something we've learned more about the problem set. And then we go for another couple of weeks, we time box. This is called empirical process control. We're going to use empiricism. We're going to use the data that we're gathering. We're going to use the feedback that we're getting by testing things, testing ideas, and then we're going to continue to inspect and adapt. And again, our goal is not to get to the red target. That is not what we're trying to do, because the red target was defined at the beginning, which was, again, our dumbest point. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to find the point that is actually going to be the one that we where we maximize value. Writing above the line there. Our goal is to actually get the most value that we can over the life of this initiative, this project, this thing that we're trying to do. And we need to focus on, instead of being plan driven, I call this having more of a value-driven mindset. But what it requires is iteration. What it requires is focusing on small things, getting something out there, and we call it shortening the feedback loop, as opposed to, in the red scenario, maybe this is a 6-month project and it takes us 6 months before we get feedback on something. We need to get feedback faster because we have less certainty, right? In the red world, I call this, we have mythical certainty, right? Everybody loves a plan. And until we have the plan, everybody's worried. Everybody's stressed out. It's like we don't have a plan. And as soon as I put a plan out in front of you, some nice Gantt chart, I put a plan in front of you, and everybody's going to be like, oh, good, we got a plan. Woo, all right, we got it figured out. We know what we're going to do. Let's execute on it. And it gives us a good feeling, but it's an illusion. It's an illusion of certainty. The plan is precise. The plan has everything laid out, but it's all built on shaky ground. And that shaky ground are all the assumptions that went into that plan. All the assumptions around us understanding the customer landscape, understanding the solution that we're going to build, all of those things. And so we got to have a process that we're using to be able to focus on that customer and get feedback quickly, and then adapt our plan based on that. And so with Agile, what we do is we actually plan to replan. We actually do way more planning than we do in a traditional way, because we're not just creating one plan, we're creating the original, and then we're starting to execute, and every 2 weeks we're revisiting and we're refining. And so what I'm going to walk you through, talking with Greg, what we realized, like what might be best for this group is to kind of help you understand a little bit of what does it look like to do Agile, and what are the kind of building blocks and some things that you could take and use. So I'm going to walk you through the most common Agile framework, which is called Scrum. And Scrum, that name, it's weird, but it comes from like a rugby scrum. The idea of you got a team of people working together to kind of get the ball across the goal line, right? You know, kind of like we're working as a scrum. And this is, as Greg mentioned, all these Agile practices, yes, they came out of the software world, but there is nothing in the Scrum framework that's software specific. And it can be applied, and we're seeing it applied in marketing organizations across the whole organization, scaling up to large organizations. We work with, you know, small companies of 12 people to, you know, Southwest Airlines of, tens of thousands of people, and applying these practices. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the core of what are some of these practices. And it starts with a team. And when we think about a team, the key concept here is we want a cross-functional. The reason why I'm putting different colors is because we want it to be cross-functional. We don't want to create a team, a set of silos, right? Like marketing is over there, operations is over there. You know, everybody's off doing their own thing. You know, we have teams within Agile Velocity where we have marketing, we have our Agile coaches, we have Agile trainers, we have operations people, we have a cross-functional team that together they can get value out the door all by themselves without being, what we're trying to do is simplify, as opposed to having to throw things over the wall to that team and wait on them and having dependencies across all these different people. How do we get everybody working together so that we can get something delivered quickly? Because when we have stuff where we're throwing it over the wall, what happens is we have a lot of wait time in our processes. So it starts with this cross-functional dedicated team. And then the first thing that we have in Scrum, the first concept is we start to build what we call backlog. And this is just a list of all the work that we need to do. But the really key thing is that it's ordered. It's not just prioritized, because if I come to all you senior leaders and I say, prioritize this list, what's everything going to come back as? It's all high priority. Right? So it's ordered. What's really key is that we say we want to have something that's ordered so that we're creating clarity for the organization of what should we work on next, right? And we're limiting how many things we're going to work on at one time. So we have this backlog, and we have a role that is the owner of this backlog. So there's a person here that is managing, is the owner of this backlog, who's managing this kind of funnel of work that's coming in, that all these requests for this team, so that there's one person that's getting clarity of and getting the answer to, okay, what do we focus on, as opposed to what we've traditionally done, which is assign tasks to individuals. What we're now saying is we're going to take and prioritize the things we need to get out the door, the value we need to deliver, and then we are going to assign and get that assigned to the team, and then the team is going to swarm around getting that done. And so what we do with this Scrum kind of framework is that we work in a series of what we call 2-week sprint cycles. So a sprint is this 2 weeks of working. And what we do is we start with taking and creating a plan for those 2 weeks. So we call this sprint planning. And in this planning session, what we're doing is pulling work off of that backlog, but only pulling what we can get done in the next 2 weeks. So one of the key concepts of Agile is focusing. We call it limiting WIP, limiting work in process, limiting how many things we're working on at one time so we can get things done. We have a saying, to stop starting, start finishing. And so what we want to do is say, okay, we can get these 3 things done in the next 2 weeks, and we create this plan of, okay, these 3 things, and what are all the tasks we need to do to get this work done. So we kind of go off and we create this plan. And in creating this plan, we do that in a session every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks we go and we create a sprint plan. Then every day we have an inspect and adapt cycle. And what we're inspecting and adapting on is this plan. So every day we get together, and we call this a daily scrum. So in a daily scrum, we get together and we're talking about, okay, we created a plan. How are we doing on our plan? What did everybody get done yesterday? What should we focus on today? Oh, you got that done? Or you're blocked on that? Oh, I'll help you out with that, right? 15 minutes or less huddle. And we can do that in under 15 minutes because we all created a plan together. And every day we're getting together, we're huddling, we're talking about any risks we have to our plan, and we're going to execute on that plan, but inspect and adapt. So we're actually doing planning every day for the day, just for the next 24 hours. The goal of this sprint is to deliver some value at the end. We call this an increment of value. So this isn't we designed what we're going to go build. This is, we've designed something, we built it, we've built some functionality, we're going to deliver it, right? We're going to go test it. So if we were trying to build some 3-month thing, well, what could we get done in the first 2 months that we could start getting feedback on? Because back up here, right, every 2 weeks we want to get feedback on how we're doing. And that could be feedback all the way into the market, into a customer. That's the challenge. That's the thing that we're trying to test. Sometimes it's just feedback internally, but as much as we can, we're trying to get feedback all the way from the market. And in the 2 events we do at the end of a sprint is one that we call the sprint review. And in the sprint review, what we're doing is we're inviting stakeholders across the organization to come and provide feedback on that increment. So we're now inspecting and adapting on, say we have a team, they've gone off, they've built something, and now we're saying, all right, hey, leadership team, whoever, come, let's talk about what we did, let's get feedback on it, let's iterate on this. And then the last thing that we do in a sprint is what we call sprint retro or sprint retrospective. And this is where our team, we're interacting with our team here, and our team is retrospecting on how can we get better? How can we improve? Not management coming and telling them how to improve. This is the team taking ownership of their process and how they're working and identifying what are ways that they can get better, what are ways that they can improve and get and optimize the process and how they're working. So a big part about Agile is empowering the worker closest to the problem, empowering that team and transferring some ownership to that team, given back on the backlog, the goals and kind of the objectives that we had that could be from a vision, from a leadership perspective and what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah, so those are, I was just validating I hit all of the key things. There is a role in here that, whoops, wrong pin. There's a role in here that is also kind of, it's called the Scrum Master, who's helping coach the guide a team through kind of Agile adoption and kind of helping the organization learn these practices, get better at these practices, improving those practices. But that, in a nutshell, is kind of the Scrum framework. It's one of those things that's simple, hard to master. We'll send out a link. There's just Scrum is defined in an 18-page document, right? It's not that, there's not a lot of rules to it. It's supposed to be lightweight and simple. And that's why it can be applied anywhere in the organization. But it is one of those things that's hard to master on how do we really get things broken down into 2-week chunks? How do we get things that we can, so how do we get everybody swarming together, working as one high-performing team, right? Those are some of the hard dynamics that come into play.
David, I know that
kind of a high level on kind of just the framework and some of those elements to just kind of seed some of the conversation, but then I'm going to kind of bring it back to
Yeah. So let me throw a couple of questions at you,
Yeah.
David, while you're at this point, because I think probably most of the people on this call are probably quite familiar with huddles. Many of them are probably doing huddles. So we see, in our discussion with clients, quite a very broad adoption of the huddles, which obviously fit nicely into, a Scrum group.
Yeah.
If you're doing huddles, but you're not, what's the biggest barrier that you guys see from your practice of getting people to actually go through this cycle and keep repeating it and keep doing it, rather than it just being another good idea that never gets implemented?
Yeah. So I think I think the pattern I see, if all we've implemented are huddles, then we potentially that can deteriorate into it's just a status meeting. It's and who's the status meeting for? Is it for management? Right? It's a huddle so that management knows what's going on, and it could serve them, and that could be valuable. But what we want in this structure is this is a huddle for the team to coordinate, right? It's not about, there's a little bit of status element, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't to provide status. The goal is for us to be aligned on what happened so that we can make decisions about what are we going to do today? How are we going to adjust and make decisions today? But it's the team's huddle, right? And it's not leadership's huddle. Now, leadership could also have a huddle, right? And they could be coordinating as a Scrum team, in terms of the things they do. But what's really key here is that huddle is tied back to, use a different color, right? Is tied back to the original plan, right? And if we don't have the plan and we're just having huddles, then we're just, hey, what are you working on? What am I working on? And we're kind of doing that in almost silo, right? It's like, I'm providing you an update, you're providing me an update. And then it turns into, does anybody need help today? No? Okay, let me know if you need help. In Agile and Scrum, in this way, it's we all committed to a plan in the next 2 weeks. It's our goal. We have shared ownership of it. There's no your job and my job. It's we got to get this done. And we're holding each other accountable every day, right? And it starts to create a different dynamic when we create a plan together and we have a 2-week deadline.
Yeah, cool. All right, I'll let you roll on, and then we'll hit you with some Q&A here as they start to come in. We've got a couple.
Yeah. Reslin's giving me a hard time about my drawings. Thank you. Thank you, Reslin.
David, can I weigh in for just a sec?
Yeah.
I think that the beautiful people drawing in the middle with the multiple colors is critical. Even if you can't have everybody in the same space on a cross-functional team, the impact of being able to pull in, let's say, legal, right, or compliance, or if you have a manufacturing group, being able to pull those people into those huddles so that they get insight early is one of the ways that you can actually build momentum. So Greg, you talked about what gets in the way. It's usually momentum starts high and then drops off. But if you can get people that are normally brought in at the end of the chain, right? Like if you bring them in early and they get to weigh in, you can actually uncover a lot of challenges and solve them faster because they brought insight and expertise. So you don't have to do everything, but one of my things is that if you have the right people around the problem and the plan, it can make acceleration possible.
Yeah, I think from our own experience, so we pretty much do the sprint cycle within our consulting practice. So in our case, we do consulting, tax, audited financial statements, and what we call accounting solutions. And so I would say we're 90% of the way there on our consulting practice, and by no surprise, it actually has the best labor efficiency ratio of anything we do because we do it this way. But because it was a new type of service, I was able to get everybody to buy into it and do it that way, versus I still struggle getting our traditional lines of practice to do this methodology. Even though they see the numbers in terms of our success of making it more efficient, it is still, do you have any experiences of breaking through kind of an industry mindset to get people to really embrace this and realize it is going to be the thing that makes you, much more successful in what you do?
Well, and there's a couple things in that, right? One is getting, there's the breakthrough of like, well, I've had a lot of success managing my work this way, and you're asking me to do it different, and that's just a mindset like change. That's scary. I don't know how to do that. I know how to be a hero here. I don't know how to be a hero there, right? Like that's just normal change management. And with that, we got to be clear on what's the objective. The objective isn't to do Scrum. The objective isn't to do Agile. The objective is we need to be more efficient. We need to be faster in our delivery. We need to, like, if we can get aligned, we can get everybody aligned around a business outcome that we're trying to achieve. Then we can say, okay, can we get there with our current processes? Or do we need some new processes in order to get there, right? And that's how that's how we attack the mindset shift. It's like, it's not about, I think I have a process that's better than your process, because nobody will ever win that argument, right? No, I think mine's better. No, I think mine's better. The other side of it is, this is one framework in Agile, and it's not necessarily the right one for everybody, right? So there's another one that's very common that comes out of the lean world, which is called Kanban, and Kanban. And for some of the work that's on the other side that you're describing could be when there's things that are more repeatable, and it's kind of where we're doing things and it's the same stuff over and over and over. You know, it's like, all right, you know, let's say the closing the books, like we got to close the books, and we do the same things. We got our checklist, and we've got to execute on those things. It doesn't make as much sense for every 2 weeks we're going to get together and we're going to task all those things out again, because it's the same stuff every month. However, and I'm going to tie this answer into Alan's question that he put in the Q&A, which was, how do I balance routine work with longer term work and fire drills that are happening all the time? So a key concept within this is creating transparency into all the work. And the reason why this is really important in our world of knowledge work is because we're dealing with virtual goods. Like if we were managing a factory floor, we would see all the inventory. We would see all the unfinished product. We would see things in progress. And we would see that like things are backing up over there, and let's go address that. But in our world of knowledge work, everything's virtual, and it could be tracked in somebody's to-do list on their desk. It could be over in that tool. It could be over here. It could be nowhere, and it's just in people's heads. And so one of the really key concepts we have is creating visualizations. And if we're in person, this could be Post-its on a whiteboard. If we're, there's tools for this to virtualize. But the idea is that all of our work is visible, and the steps of like, hey, this is planned work, this is in progress work, this is, reviewed work, or, and done work, that we make all of that visible. And that allows everybody involved to see kind of the factory floor, if you will. How much stuff are we working on right now? Who's working on what? Where are our bottlenecks? And start to see that as a team, so we can self-manage, see it as a leadership team of like, why isn't that team getting as much work done as I think that, they got a whole lot of stuff they're working on. And it allows us to make informed decisions about, as a CEO, if, I say, I want you to work on this, I can go to that board and go, all right, but it's not as high as priority as those three things, so I would slot it here. So to Alan's question, dealing with routine work, long-term projects, and fire drills, my short answer is make it all visible, right? And so there could be a swim lane here that's the fire drills. There's a swim lane for routine work, and there's a swim lane for, project 1 and project 2 that we've prioritized to do. And we've got, Post-it notes or tasks that are moving across this board that we've got visibility, so we can see how that work is competing with each other. And we can help as leaders, help our teams prioritize that work, as opposed to just saying it's all got to get done, right? And just, and we call this push versus pull. Like our goal is for allowing teams to pull work as they have availability, as opposed to just say, you got to get everything done by the end of the week, right? And if that's feasible or not, we've just, we haven't necessarily used data to define that. So creating visibility, and we do that, like the sprint plan turns into a board like this, and so that way we've got visibility of that. But you also want to manage the interruptions, the things that are coming up.
Well, I know that, if I had my career to live over, I totally undersold the value in the time spent in planning and the updating of the planning And and as we've gotten better at committing to it, I think that's the part that you got to tell yourself you don't have time not to plan.
Right.
But the first thing that you kind of shared early on in the presentation that really struck me was, I think, my team that struggles with efficiency too, I think they approach everything like that manufacturing cycle of thinking that they're putting together a series of knowns to hit a target, when they have misidentified the work. That your first goal is to find all the unknowns,
right,
and continue to flush those out, in that cycle. And I think that's something that that's the first time I've heard that description of that really, kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, and it's like so one exercise we'll do is, first thing we need to do is document what are all the assumptions we're making, right? And then we can characterize those assumptions or categorize those assumptions based on what's the risk that we're wrong, and what's the impact if we're wrong, right? I should say it this way: how likely are we wrong, and what's the impact if we are wrong, right? And so something that is likely we're wrong and the impact is high if we're wrong, well, we better do something to prove that right or wrong early, right? But something that's, unlikely that we're wrong and not that big of an impact, well, maybe we don't have to worry about those. But that is a really important lens to look through, especially with a lot of this kind of stuff in this kind of VUCA world that we're in. All right.
Hey, David, we have some questions come in. Can you give us some case studies on the change that can happen in a non-software, more professional service business?
Yeah, let me do that so everybody's faces shape up. Yeah. So, so what we've seen is as these agile practices, so Agile and these practices were invented in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. In the early, through 2010, I would say pretty much all this was applied in technology. But over the last 10 years, we've seen it start to spread out, because we realized, all right, the reason why it worked well in software is because that's such a high knowledge work and high kind of complexity kind of world. But we realized lots of other places are getting more complex, as Eric mentioned. So some of the case studies. So we did some stuff with Southwest Airlines marketing organization from a non-software perspective. So what they were doing was, if you think about marketing, I think if some of the other folks here are other small business owners, marketing is one of those fun things where it's like, all right, there's a bunch of data and everything is just a guess. And even being able to tie back, hey, we did this and that caused that to happen, is really tough. So from a VUCA perspective, everything in what you're doing from a marketing it's a test, right? It's a bet, it's a guess. Like, we're going to try Google AdWords. We're going to try this. We're going to do webinars. We're going to do these different things. And how do we test and experiment, and how are we going to measure success? Getting clear on that. So we've seen it applied there. We've seen it from a people HR practices perspective, and saying, all right, how are we managing recruiting, right? And from a talent perspective, and creating visualizations of the kind of talent pipeline. Even if you think about your sales pipeline fits into this kind of like Kanban pipeline perspective, right? Because it's like, all right, there's these different steps, and along the way, most of the sales tools, CRM tools, are starting to create that kind of visualization, so I can see where are all my deals and where are they in the deal flow, right? So it applies across all of those things, and there's a whole new space emerging called business agility, and that's really about how, as an organization and as a leadership team, are we able to respond to change? We're seeing strategic planning changing from, Eric mentioned, like it used to be the 3-year plan, even then the 1-year plan, and now it's even hard to think about, like, what is our 1-year plan? So it's important to have vision, but it's and it's important to have kind of key initiatives, but at the same rate, like saying we have a plan for exactly that we're gonna execute on for the next year. And so we're seeing more of a push towards OKRs, objectives and key results. And so we help organizations with that as more of a 90-day kind of objectives and key results type of process for that's switching kind of how we do some of the strategic planning. So we're seeing kind of a shift in that direction. I don't know, Eric, if you had anything else you want to add to the case studies question.
No, I think yes, I do. The bottom line is, if you, again, same principles, right? If you're shrinking the problem set and you're not trying to tackle all of it at once, and you're not doing big reveals, you still have your cross-functional team. And that's just using marketing as an example, right? Marketing in MarTech, for example, is blown up, right? Like the whole space has gotten so big. And so there's a lot more niches now in marketing, and people work in their segments inside of marketing. Is not one thing. It's a bunch of different silos, just like at the org level. So by simply pulling these people together and shrinking the problems and having more bite-sized efforts that you can evaluate every 2 weeks, there's a lot of, I come from the business side, and to be honest, there's a lot of guessing, right? You try to hypothesize and do your research and figure it out, but you're still not sure what's going to happen in the wild. So getting those different groups together, getting them solving around the same problem set, identifying what they're learning, that's a huge thing. So Greg, I think one of the things I also would say is, how do we, if we're business owners or we're leaders in the organization, how do we encourage our teams to learn, right? How is it okay to say, we don't know, or we're going to have to go figure out? How do you encourage your people to be able to experiment and try things and learn? And failure isn't fatal, right? And how do you help them build that kind of durability so that they can go out and solve those problems and then get better over time?
Well, I think it was in Dan Pink's book, When he published some research studies of, you talk about the traditional longer term project management, that there's the first half of the project is, you think I got it. You get to the halfway point and it's the, oh bleep, I ain't got it. And then he said, all of a sudden you apply all your creativity, do all these things that we're talking about, and land the plane, sometimes on one wheel, sometimes on the tail, but you get there, in the end. And he said, can we not find a way to harness that skill and ability and do it from the beginning? And I think this is the only process that I know of. But there again, we got to fight through all the obstacles that says, why aren't more of us doing this? And I'm one of the people that struggle with it and make sure it happens. But as we've applied it, there's no doubt that we've had success, with it. And I think the more iterations that we all learn from each other and say, okay, what's our blocker? What's our obstacle? What can we push through to make this happen, and use all those, then I think we can all get better from it.
Yeah. So
type
in an answer for your Joanne's question there around the tools. So found a tool for transparency dashboard, and just what other tools are out there. So if we weren't in this virtual world, my first answer has always been, and you had a co-located team, is there's nothing better than just putting Post-its on a wall, right, or on a whiteboard, and just having that where everybody can see, everybody can walk by, and you can huddle around it, and your daily huddle is looking at that board, and not everybody looking at a virtual tool or looking at a conference room screen. But we aren't in that world. So the simplest one that's out there that a lot of people use is just called Trello. But also there's some tools that are just virtual whiteboard tools. So like you could put Post-its on a whiteboard, and Miro is one of those. Mural is one of those. We use Kanban Flow. Jira is another, is the heavier end of that a lot of teams use on the more advanced side. And so I just posted those in the chat.
Cool. And last one, our LT at times seems like he's drowning, but we can't get anyone to ask for help. They are good soldiers. Totally see how this would transform that. What is a good first step to getting people to do this?
And I think, yeah, specifically, how do we get the leadership team doing this right? I think you've got to expose them to some concepts, right? And help them make up their mind around it. There's actually been a lot of Harvard Business Review articles recently over the last couple of years. The one that came out last month was on the cover around the Agile executive and the Agile C-suite. So getting them to that, we'll send you some links like this green line, red line thing that I drew. We've got that recorded as a YouTube video, like it's a 7-minute video. Like what can you do to start getting and challenging how they're thinking about things that would get them interested in learning more? I think that's really the key element of that. If you can get through that, then there may be, okay, they can, come didn't get into webinars or go to a training session or invite more and learn more about it. But they've got to be interested. Eric?
And David, if I could, what they're interested in are business results, right? So if you come into a leader and you're gonna sell them a process, they don't care. I don't care, right? Like, I love Agile for what it gets me, right? I love what it does in terms of morale and focus and all of those things. But at the end of the day, leaders are motivated to achieve results. And so I think where Agilists and Agile goes a little bit awry is that we do fall in love with the process a bit much, and we forget we're trying to achieve an outcome. And that's one of the things I think that does make us a little bit different, is we want to start with, okay, you are focused on getting things done. You need to put ideas into market faster. Okay, let's work back from that, right? And leaders will meet you there because that's what they want too, right? And we don't always know what leaders want. And some of the fun that we have is that leaders will say, I want it all, right? And then they have the same problem that the team does, which is you have to prioritize. So it gets to be an important part of it, is that you have to meet the leaders where they're at, and they're probably feeling pressure around some business result.
All right.
Anything else?
No, we're good.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Wow, it's good, great stuff. I mean, I think this is really kind of the next frontier in terms of business processes, that, the more of us that can kind of practice it, share ideas. I mean, this discussion comes up a lot in our mastermind groups, in terms of people finding ways. Like you said, the marketing is a classic area of people just throw activity at something, but they don't have fast enough feedback loops to adapt, because if there ever was an unknown frontier, it's marketing. Believe in it, you got to do it, but let's do it, at its best impact. And that's one of the classic places.
So where can they find out more information, Eric?
On their screen. I hope you can see it. Obviously, we'd love to talk with you if you're trying to solve some of these problems. If you're finding yourself up against a wall and trying to figure out how to equip your teams to be able to perform better, we love to do what we do because we've seen the benefits. I've had 2 conversations this week with clients that we worked with who said that they are now resilient and they are able to adjust, and they handled the remote stuff. They handled their work. They're not losing momentum. So we have some examples on av.com, which you can certainly go there, and you can call us or email us, and we'd be happy to make time to talk with you, because this is important stuff. This is, like we talked about in the beginning, we are experiencing lots of shock waves, and being able to navigate those is super important. So thank you, Greg and Mike, so much for having us. Yeah. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah,
you're welcome. Yeah, thank you for everyone attending. We will kick out a recording of this via there's a follow-up email that goes out through Zoom. I'll throw a link in there, and then I'll also post it to our YouTube channel. I'll have that posted on my LinkedIn as well. So everyone have a great rest of your week, good weekend, and stay tuned for the next episode. And definitely more to come. As soon as Greg's book comes out, we'll get him on here for you all to hear him too. So take care. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.